Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm JJ Flazanes, your producer and empowerment strategist. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today's episode is a long time coming. I'm excited about this conversation and sharing it with you. I'm not going to go on too much about it. It is with Dr. William Davis. He wrote the New York Times bestselling book, Wheat Belly, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Dr. Davis here in a second. I just want to tell you a few things that are going on that I have not announced very well. The first is I'm doing a 5 mistakes people make with law of attraction free webinar and masterclass on Tuesday, May 11th. That's happening at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time, and it is jjflazanes.com/LOA. Again, jjflazanes.com/LOA. The 5 mistakes people make with law of attraction. It's a free class. I'm doing it one time. And if you're interested, sign up and join me live on Tuesday, May 11th, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Now, I'm sure you've heard, maybe, hopefully. I don't know if you follow me on Instagram, but that's like the number one place I post most things next to Facebook. But I have opened the doors to the Manifestation Bootcamp happening in October 1st through the 3rd, 2021 in Redondo Beach, California. If you're interested in coming, there's an early bird option for many things. There's a 5-pay plan, there's a full pay plan, and there's even an early bird on the virtual ticket. And simply what that means is you will get all the recordings like an online course, even if you can't attend. But all those prices go up on June 1st. So you have the rest of May to take advantage of the early bird pricing for the Manifestation Bootcamp. And that is jjflazanes.com/bootcamp. All of the links will be in the show notes. I just wanted to make sure you knew that the early bird pricing was happening and there's only a few weeks left until it changes. So if you want to come, you can secure your ticket. You can even do a 5-month paying plan to get there. I'm only going to be able to sell as many tickets as I can fit people in the room. And then past that, it will just be the virtual ticket. So check out jjflazanes.com/bootcamp to get your early bird ticket to the Manifestation Bootcamp. Now on to today. Today's show is Wheat Belly and Heart Disease with Dr. William Davis. Dr. William Davis is the author of the New York Times #1 bestseller, Wheat Belly, Lose the Wheat, Lose the Weight, and Find Your Path Back to Health. The book that turned the nutritional world by storm by challenging the conventional wisdom of healthy whole grains, exposing the changes introduced into modern wheat by geneticists responsible for an astounding range of adverse health effects. He's also the author of New York Times bestsellers Wheat Belly Cookbook, Wheat Belly 30-Minute or Less Cookbook, and Wheat Belly Total Health. Dr. Davis has discussed his views on major media, including The Dr. Oz Show, Live with Kelly, Fox TV, and CBS This Morning, and has been featured in Prevention Magazine, First for Women Magazine, New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Chicago Tribune, New York Post, Women's World Magazine, Huffington Post, and many others. The Wheat Belly Total Health special for the public television network is currently airing nationwide. Find it on your local stations and times on the PBS website. With no further ado, I hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to today's show. I am very excited about today. This is long overdue. And if you are listening to this on the podcast, know that there is a video. Come on over to jjflazanes.tv to check out that video. And if you are watching us on the video, you can also take it with you on the podcast. Click the link below and download the podcast so you can take it with you on your exercise or while you're driving or while you're multitasking in your life, because I don't want you to miss today's information. Today, I have with me Dr. William Davis, who wrote Wheat Belly. And he wrote Wheat Belly back in 2014. And again, like I said, this is way long overdue. Some of you know my story, some of you don't, but I'll be telling it again so I can get into this great conversation. Welcome to the show, Dr. Davis.
Oh, thank you, JJ. Glad to be here.
So my short story is I've been a personal trainer for 20 years, turned life coach, turned business coach, life coach, turned empowerment strategist. And along the way, I've worked in integrative medical clinics as the trainer and as the sort of life coach. Always so super interested in all the science applied to all things. I'm an expert in biomechanics. I studied my biochemistry. I'm up to date on some of the latest things that are going on in health because I am my subject and I am my first client and patient because I care about what happens to my body. Back in 2008 was the first time I had heard rumblings about gluten being an issue and creating inflammation in people. And Jeannie Peters at Nourishing Wellness Medical Center, where I'm also a trainer, said to me, there's something to this. And so we researched it a little bit more, and I don't know how much information was there. And I remember her going gluten-free, for a little while, and then eating like a pasta at night at a restaurant, and then feeling puffy the next day. And I was about to get married, and I decided that I was going to do some kind of detox or some kind of program, and it ended up that I ended up going gluten-free. And in the first 10 days of not eating gluten, I lost 6 pounds of water weight. I lost all cravings for, like, when I would smell pizza, I would salivate. That stopped happening. However, I did replace, it wasn't a calorie thing because I had plenty of cheese and I had plenty of meat and I had plenty of, I would make sure to replace like my pizza crust, and I'd have, I didn't overeat carbs, but I definitely replaced any of the foods that I might have a craving for or didn't want to feel deprived about, like cookies or a brownie or pizza. So I have been gluten-free since 2008. That's all I needed to understand that while I'm not allergic, I had a sensitivity, and I saw what happened when I gave it up completely. And again, I'll occasionally have it. I like to say that out of 365 days of the year, I may have it 5 times, but generally, and it goes down every year. Like I think I had it 4 times, unless I'm in Italy, but otherwise I'm 99.5% gluten-free 360 days of the year. So I want to go back a little bit because I know it's been a while and you've done a revision of the book in 2019 and you're on to you're continuing this momentum of this education and food. But what even started you? Like, where did you even start to begin to think about and look at how wheat was affecting our health?
JJ, it all started about 20 some years ago, actually, when I set up the first CT heart scan device in Wisconsin. And we start this is a device, if your listeners are unfamiliar, that detects early coronary disease, heart disease, atherosclerotic plaque by quantifying calcium, because calcium is an indirect measure of atherosclerotic plaque volume in your coronary arteries. A serious disease, right? Heart attack, death, sudden cardiac death, need for bypass surgery, that kind of stuff. And at the time I was doing interventional cardiology, putting in stents and all that sort of thing. Well, I'm scanning people left and right. We're scanning thousands of people and uncovering a ton of hidden coronary disease. A normal score is 0, no plaque, no calcium. But people are coming through with scores of 300, 500, 1,000, and then, of course, freaking out. Well, back then, the only thing we had 20 some years ago was a low-fat diet, statin drugs like Lipitor, Zocor, aspirin, and exercise. So he did that. We also helped publish data to show if you did nothing, those scores would go up 25% per year. So a score of 500 would be a score of 625 or so a year later. And every jump every year, you're closer and closer to dying or having a heart attack or needing a procedure. And of course, my colleagues love that because that's how they make a lot of money. But these people are coming back, and we also help publish the data. If you put somebody on a low-fat diet, high-dose Lipitor, for instance, exercise program, aspirin, score goes up 25% per year. 0 impact, no effect whatsoever. In other words, my colleagues actually call that optimal medical therapy. The best they got does not work, but it fuels the huge cardiovascular money-making machine. And I made a lot of money back then too, as I was doing all those things. But it became clear that the conventional answers were wildly inadequate. So I had to stumble about for a number of years. We tried all kinds of different things. Many things did not work. Niacin does not help very much. Fibrates don't help too much. Statins are garbage. What does work? Vitamin D, for instance, huge effect on putting a stop to coronary calcium score progression. But one of the biggest things that drives growth of plaque by CT heart scans is small LDL particles, not this garbage, outdated measure called LDL cholesterol. That is an outdated, it should have been discarded decades ago. There are superior measures, and if you do advanced lipoproteins, that's the real test, you see that people who have coronary disease, whether it's a stent, sudden cardiac death, bypass surgery, or coronary calcium score, virtually all have a huge number of small LDL particles, which are much more oxidation prone, much more adherent to artery walls. They persist for 5 to 7 days rather than 24 hours of large LDL particles triggered by fat consumption. So I asked, what in the world causes small LDL particles? Well, the science was clear. It's not my speculation. There was science from UC Berkeley, from Hopkins. It was clear. Grains and sugars cause an explosion in small LDL particles. So I'm telling my patients, all of whom have coronary disease, all right, let's just try this. You've got 2,143 nanomoles per liter, particle count per volume, small LDL particles. Let's try this. They come back 3-6 months later, whatever. Small LDL drops to 0 typically. But they said to me back, this is 15 years ago or so, well, you didn't tell me I'd lose 47 pounds. You didn't tell me that I'd have to stop my insulin and my Byetta injections and my metformin because my blood sugar would go down so much and I'd be normal. I'm no longer a diabetic. I had to stop my 3 blood pressure medicines because my blood pressure was so low. My rheumatoid arthritis is gone. I stopped the Humira and the prednisone. In other words, I saw a transformation in health. I stumbled on JJ. I did not do this on purpose. And I thought, what the hell? Why would removing the food that all dietitians, all physicians, all official agencies agree you must be the cornerstone of your diet, we remove it and you see dramatic transformations in health.
What I think is hilarious to me is that you're in Wisconsin. And it's like, I mean, not that the whole world, right? Because we're having this conversation is late, guys. All right. You've heard me talk about gluten-free forever. And we've talked about it with Jeannie, but we haven't gone deep. And I haven't given you the science, and I haven't challenged some of the beliefs that some of you hold about this process. And I love that this wasn't even just a personal thing, that it was something that you wanted as a physician, we're testing on your patients. And then it was a sort of like when I went gluten-free, I didn't know what to expect. And it wasn't weight loss, maybe it was more like lack of puffiness, but then it was like that weight, the water weight came off. And again, all the biochemical things in my body, like not craving pizza, not having cravings. Let's just start there. Not having cravings, not having that inflammation that was constantly asking me to either feed it, and it was taking over my body in the way that it would control my brain and my attention to feeding and to eating, and how hungry I wasn't. And so I find this now, you're talking about grains and sugars, but your book, the first one, is about wheat. So can we talk a little bit about the difference of why we tackled wheat and why you didn't go straight to the grain and all grains?
As you know, you have to pick your battles. And I knew that, when I say to people, don't eat grains, they don't hear, don't eat millet. Wheat is by far and away the most dominant grain. So when you have whole wheat toast or sandwiches or bagels or pizza crust, it's all wheat. Corn is a problem also. Now, one of the things to know, this helps people understand. Grains are really seeds of grasses. That's what they literally are. They're seeds of grasses. And humans simply, it's just a basic physiologic fact, JJ. Humans don't have the enzymes, the digestive enzymes that break down the proteins in seeds of grasses. If you, heaven forbid, you and your family were starving and you stumble upon a wheat field or a grass field, you wouldn't say, hallelujah, we're going to eat like kings now. Grains are not reviewed as food by humans. It is testimony to how clever ancient humans were. They managed to isolate the seed and turn it into something they could consume, not recognizing that the proteins in wheat are largely indigestible. And that's why they have so that effect you enjoyed, a reduction in appetite, is because the gliadin protein within gluten, the gliadin protein. So if you eat an egg or a piece of beef, you break the proteins down to single amino acids. And those single amino acids make your skin and hair and organs, etc. If you eat the gliadin protein of wheat, it's broken down to 4 or 5 amino acid long peptides or fragments. Well, these peptides are unique. They have opioid effects on the human brain. They stimulate appetite. It's the reason why, for instance, people who like pasta, they'll eat a big bowl of pasta. They're filled to bursting, yet they're still hungry. That's the opioid, the gliadin-derived opioid peptide effects. When you get rid of the gliadin protein, your appetite is miraculously diminished and you revert back to eating for sustenance. So wheat and related grains have this protein that yields a very potent appetite stimulant. So you'll see this most strikingly, people with bulimia and binge eating disorder. These are poor people who can't stop. They obsess about food 24 hours a day. These are the people sit in front of a refrigerator at 3 a.m. and gorge and then purge. These people, I can't say 100%, but the majority are miraculously freed from that effect when they get rid of all gliadin-derived opioid peptides.
I have worked with people over the years, and this was prior to, I guess, claiming life coach, business coach, was more of a nutrition sort of expert and personal trainer, who I would see one guy in particular who came into the clinic and he was overweight. He got himself in, he was in therapy. He was in Overeaters Anonymous. He was in he had 5 different groups he was in because he was convinced he was an emotional eater. And by the time he got to me, I said, did Jeannie tell you about the food sensitivity test? And he said, no. I said, well, march your butt back in there and tell her to give you the food sensitivity test. And at the time he was eating popcorn and whey protein and yogurt and he was eating sugar and maybe fake sugars, but he removed a bunch of things from his diet. I'm not sure if wheat was on there, but he lost 16 pounds in 2 weeks and all of a sudden didn't have an appetite. And too often I see people who are eating wheats and sugars who think that they're an emotional eater. And I'm like, we won't know if it's emotional until we remove it. If you're still obsessive about eating after we take it out of the diet, then we can look at what emotions you're trying to repress through food. Otherwise, your biochemistry will respond to this protein and to what's going on in your body and make you think that it's emotional because you have these cravings. These cravings are biological. These cravings aren't necessarily psychological. Now, sometimes it is. But in my program over the years, I created the Invisible Fitness Formula. Step number 1 is about digestion and removing all these things and doing an elimination diet, because we don't know yet if it's an emotional eating thing. We don't know yet if it's hormonal until we clean up the diet and remove these inflammatory substances. So I want to ask you, because one of the things I've talked about over the years and how I've described it, and it's based on my own experience and a little bit of research, but definitely not where you're coming from. I've kind of told people that gluten and inflammatory foods act like a light switch, because I think people hear it like calories. Oh, I'll just reduce it. I'll just have a little bit less. And I'm like, no, you're either in inflammation or you're not. Like if you eat it, you're like turning the switch on. And if you stop eating it after a certain time, it's out of your body, then now your body goes back to sort of the off switch. So can we speak about the level of inflammation? Because there are people who even today will eat, who don't react necessarily. So they don't have a huge reaction right away. And they'll think, oh, it's okay. I'll just have a little bit. I'll just eat a little less. What would you say to that?
Yeah, the people who do that don't get all the benefit because they're still exposed to the appetite stimulation effect, as well as you point out, the inflammatory effect. So wheat and related. When I say wheat, I really mean wheat and related grains. Grains are we don't think of them this way, but they're very promiscuous and they exchange genes. Wheat and rye, for instance, the genetic code of those, they taste different, right? They look different, but the genetic code of those two grasses are almost identical. So there's a lot of interbreeding among grasses. But wheat, what was the question again, JJ?
Light switch. I used to describe it as like, if you're like, it's almost like an all or nothing. Like this isn't a situation like calories where you just eat a little bit less. It's like, no. If you're eating it, it's stimulating inflammation. Yeah.
So the biggest part of that is that the gliadin-derived opioid peptides are appetite stimulants, and they last for several days. So even if you have an occasional grain, it's going to stimulate appetite. And wheat and related grains are incredibly inflammatory. We know that the gliadin protein, for instance, we know this with good confidence from Alessio Fasano's work at Harvard and University of Maryland, that it's the first step in initiating the intestinal permeability that leads to autoimmune diseases. I can't say all, but a lot, perhaps the majority, especially rheumatoid arthritis and type 1 diabetes in kids. The gliadin protein initiates that. Also, gliadin-derived peptides, also extremely inflammatory. Another indigestible protein in wheat is wheat germ agglutinin. It has nothing to do with gluten. It sounds like it. It's called agglutinin because when it contacts blood, it causes it to clot or agglutinate. So wheat germ agglutinin is completely impervious to human digestive enzymes. So it goes through here, comes out in the toilet intact, but it's extremely inflammatory as it proceeds through the GI tract. And also, by the way, blocks the contraction of the gallbladder. And that's why it contributes to gallstones. There's the amylopectin A. Amylopectin A is the carbohydrate, so-called super carbohydrate of wheat and grains that is, contrary to the proteins, is highly digestible. So ounce for ounce, the amylopectin A in grains is responsible for sky-high blood sugars. And so when you have high blood sugars repetitively, you get high blood insulin. That leads to insulin resistance. That leads to visceral fat accumulation, inflammatory fat accumulation. So the combination of insulin resistance with growth of visceral fat, inflammatory fat, hugely ramps up inflammation. So that's why people, when you may have noticed when you first did this, when wheat and grain free, your facial structure changed. Your eyes got bigger. People's cheeks shrink. They lose inflammatory edema. They lose. People typically lose about 5 to 7 pounds in the first 10 days of doing this, and about half that is inflammatory edema, water. And people always say, "Oh, that is where you just lose water." Well, that's a great thing. If you lose inflammatory edema, it means you're reversing inflammation. So reversing inflammation is a huge benefit of this because of the numerous inflammatory components in wheat and grains.
I want to touch upon something you said about the permeability through the GI tract and address it as over time. I hear people talk about in Facebook or whatever social media, and again, these are not all my people, so I'm not getting into all kinds of conversations, but they talk about, oh, I have an autoimmune disorder, I can't fix it. And the first thing I think of, well, you probably have leaky gut, it happened over time. There's definitely emotional components to that, but my response would be, yes, you can fix that. Maybe not 100% and maybe not all the time, but I feel like our bodies can heal themselves and we have plenty of tools. Not to mention, if you didn't just happen, you didn't just out of the sky catch an autoimmune disorder. Like the body had to break down in order for it to redirect itself back to attacking itself. And diet and our gut is one of the first places that causes that, correct?
Absolutely. So the gliadin protein is the initiating factor in a lot of cases of rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, polymyalgia rheumatica, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, on and on and on. Now, vitamin D deficiency is not causative. It's what I call permissive. In other words, if you have some initiating event like consumption of wheat and grains and the gliadin protein in the presence of vitamin D deficiency, you're more likely, many times more likely to express it as an autoimmune disease. It's also becoming clear that the endotoxemia of dysbiosis, SIBO, and SIFO, that is, all that means is when you have disruptions of bacterial composition in your colon, or worse, proliferation of really unhealthy species like E. coli, Klebsiella, Campylobacter, et cetera, and that must outmuscle healthy species and then climb up the entire length of the GI tract, ileum, jejunum, duodenum, stomach. You have 30 feet now of trillions of bacteria and fungi that live and die within hours to days, so very rapid turnover. So you have trillions of organisms living and dying. Where the components of their bodies go? Well, some of it gets into your bloodstream. That's called endotoxemia. It's a relatively recently identified process, but it's huge because it explains why microbes in the GI tract can show up as rosacea on the skin, or Parkinson's disease in the brain, or as rheumatoid arthritis in the joints, or as lupus in the skin and the heart and other organs. In other words, it finally explains how microbial disruption leads to all kinds of, and one of the things it does is it can ignite autoimmune disease. And this became clear the more people went wheat and grain free, vitamin D replenished, but an occasional person would still develop a new autoimmune disease. It became clear this was endotoxemia. So we add another component to the list of strategies we have, reverse the dysbiosis /SIBO/SIFO, which is a whole conversation of its own. And we are seeing more and more people absolutely positively reverse their autoimmune diseases, provided there has not been irreversible damage done. Sadly, if you have type 1 diabetes, you wiped out your pancreatic beta cells, you don't grow them back. If you develop cirrhosis from autoimmune hepatitis, you can't replenish your liver. If you wiped out a lot of your thyroid gland from Hashimoto's thyroiditis, you can't regrow that. You're stuck on your thyroid hormones. So that's why I tell people the important thing to do is do this as soon in life as possible, including try to get your kids to do this.
I've noticed over time, we've had the conversation over the years about the difference of sensitivity versus an allergy. So like it's celiac versus sensitivity. And I also see like older people all of the sudden can't eat a bunch of things. And it's like, no, it didn't happen all of a sudden. It was a breakdown over time that you weren't paying attention to because you thought bloating and gas and constipation and irritable bowel syndrome was normal, which it's not. Indications of something going on that your body doesn't like. But we, again, collectively think this is funny, farting, like this is normal. Yet we don't look at it as this is a body's telling you there's something off, which is why my first chapter in Invisible Fitness Formula was about digestion, not about calories. It was about like looking at what is disrupting digestion, and because too many people want to think about what to eat versus what's the effect of what I'm eating. Because we start there and we have indications of success, and then we can eliminate things, and we have a healthier digestive tract. Now, I want to go back to, so that delayed symptom, again, I just sort of started seeing it because all of a sudden people would flip. Or I had an ex-client who had a heart attack. And of course, his doctor told him, went to the best of the best doctors, told him to go on that low-fat vegan diet. And I cringed because I'm like, and of course, I'm not a doctor, so they're not listening to me. And I'm like, no. So can we please speak to this, like what you said in the beginning? This is where the research came in that you were looking at. I mean, this research isn't new. So why do you think it isn't more mainstream? I mean, it's been, what, 15 years? It's been 15 going on 16 years since you published that book. It's been, I don't know, whatever, how long 2008 was away since I've been gluten-free. This isn't new information. So what is this? Why?
There's a variety of reasons, JJ, but I think the biggest reason is what I call willful ignorance. That is, if I'm a cardiologist and I make lots and lots and lots of money putting in stents and defibrillators, I'm going to pay attention to that, the newest technology in stents or rotational atherectomy or whatever new device or technology you have. Well, I'm not going to pay much attention to the dietary changes, to replenishment of lost nutrients, management of dysbiosis, because it's not going to pay me hardly anything. How about an ophthalmologist? He makes thousands and thousands of dollars every time he injects the eyes for various diseases, but never once thinks to educate his patients on how to preserve eye health. And so there's willful ignorance to pay attention to the things selectively that pay well. And so what that has done to the healthcare system is, well, there are times we need the healthcare system. If you have COVID-19 and you can't breathe and you're in respiratory distress, you need a hospital. But for the vast majority of health issues, you do not need a hospital, and the doctors have failed you. The doctors do not do their job because all they're interested in is revenue-generating products and procedures. And that means that people need people like you and other people who talk about health, because it's not coming from the doctors. In fact, the doctors have become a miserable failure at delivering a message of health. So they're useful for COVID-19. They're useful when you break your leg. They're useful when you have dengue fever, when you return from Costa Rica. But if you want to know how to get rid of diabetes, an autoimmune disease, or a rosacea, or hundreds of other common health conditions, the last person you want to talk to is the damn doctor.
Thank you. I can't say that. Otherwise, I'm the uneducated, misinformation, liability of the yin yang. And yet you're like the 10th doctor that said that on the show. But it's the reason why I asked you to be on the show, right? I asked you to be on the show because how many doctors know anything about nutrition and tell people that it's not about food? How many cancer doctors are telling people to have their milkshakes and their sweet tea when we know that sugar feeds cancer? It's, again, ridiculous. And I, at the same time, people think, well, why aren't more Western doctors on board? And it does come down to partly financial, as well as they don't want to be bothered, probably. And like, they have a good living, they have a good life, they do what they do. Why do I need to learn more? I don't really use Western medicine I do as little as I can with Western medicine, but I do appreciate the diagnostic, but it won't be the treatment plan. The treatment plan I will create unless it's something like a procedure that I've had to have done, in which case I'm still going to do all of the pre and the post in the way that I'm going to prep my body, whether it be meditation and emotional processing and food and herbs and exercise and changing my diet and detoxing and all those things. I want to, speaking of detox, I want to go back to all the words that probably confused a lot of people, the science that you said, which is totally fine. I expect you to do it. But we talked about all that bacteria in the body. And when you have something like E. coli or something that even though when it's dead, you have it possibly in your bloodstream, which is still disrupting your digestion. So what do you tell people to do for that? I mean, obviously, if they change their diet and they have some results, but they still have an issue, what's that next step to help to eradicate that issue?
Well, there's some basic efforts people can make. I'm not a big fan of commercial probiotics because they're very inadequate. They're getting better, though. There's a fundamental problem with probiotics, several fundamental problems. One, they don't specify strains. You must absolutely specify strains, but most commercial probiotics do not. And people don't get that until you point out that, you have E. coli. I have E. coli. Your listeners have E. coli, several strains. What if you ate lettuce from the Central Valley of California tainted by cow manure and E. coli? Well, you can die of that E. coli. Same species, E. coli, different strain. So we have to know the strains, and most commercial probiotics don't even specify. Some companies are starting to. Most probiotics don't contain what are called keystone species. So a keystone species would be something like plankton in the ocean. If the plankton in the ocean disappear, as they are, by the way, whales disappear and other big creatures that depend on plankton. Well, the same kind of phenomenon in the ecosystem of your gut applies. If you don't have the right keystone species, you're going to have death or loss or diminishment of some of the other important species. And by the way, that is a very big problem in 2021, that most of us have lost many important species because of antibiotics, because of glyphosate. Glyphosate's an antibiotic as well as an herbicide, because of chlorinated drinking water, because of stomach acid blocking drugs. Statin drugs disrupt your microbiome, as do emulsifying agents in ice cream and salad dressing, and synthetic sweeteners like aspartame and sucralose. In other words, we've screwed up our bowel flora. A crude start would be a commercial high-potency multi-species probiotic. Fermented foods like kefirs, kimchis, yogurts, etc., veggies you ferment on your kitchen counter, and prebiotic fibers. I tell people every meal, aiming for an intake of 20 grams per day, where the maximum effects begin. Now, that's just a starting effort. Most people have to go further, because by my estimate, JJ, a third of the U.S. population has SIBO in some form. And I think that number is going to get bigger. I don't have my device here, but there's a device your listeners might want to know about. It's called an air device. I don't have it, but it's about the size of this little pad. And you blow into it, and it registers on your smartphone. It tells you how much hydrogen gas is coming out. It was invented by an engineer in Dublin, Ireland, Dr. Angus Short. He thought it was a device to detect hydrogen gas in people with irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, who are intolerant to FODMAPs. Fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols, essentially sugars and starches. Because his girlfriend, now fiance, had this problem. He invents this device. I call him up. I say, Angus, do you understand what you invented? He says, no. You found a device that helps you navigate almost all forms of food intolerances, whether we call it FODMAPs or legumes or nightshades or histaminergic reactions, now, the device is a little pricey, like $180 or so. But he's coming out with a new device. He told me, I last saw him a few months ago, that's going to measure hydrogen gas, methane, and hydrogen sulfide. Now we're going to have a huge insight into digestive health, and thereby health in all other parts of the body, and how to manage it. Having it do it yourself at home, no doctor required device makes you and me and your listeners magnificently smarter about what works and what does not. And so if you have, let's say, a FODMAPs or a nightshade intolerance, the solution is not eliminate that food. The solution is address the dysbiotic change in microbial species in your colon and your GI tract that made you have that food intolerance. Now we have a device, and there's going to be a new device that's even better, that helps us do that. But I love, JJ, I love having people get tools they can use on their own that doesn't require the damn doctor.
That's my show. Thank you. I try to bring as much as I can, because I'm the person who says, if someone says you can't do that, my doctors have told me, well, you can't do that. Well, watch me. Watch me. If it's in my intuition that says I can, right? There's I'm constantly learning and asking these questions and bucking the system I have my entire life. But it's like I'm learning. And then when I learn these things, I see, why does everybody else know this? And why are they not applying this? And again, it's fine. Not everybody's going to. But when we take and we empower ourselves to control our own health, and when we recognize that everything that we do, so many times in the past, looking at people that, let's say, were more wealthy, when money was something I wanted to create more of, and not, attaching it to health right away. I do now with my show Health and Wealth, but to understand that, they were focused on this one thing. And like in health and wealth, people do, you want to invest now to benefit later. It's a long-term strategizing of money, right? You have your short-term investments that give you stuff now, and then your long-term. And I used to use that in personal training to talk about the difference between cardio and resistance training. One's like a long-term investment, but health is your constant investment. Everything you do today affects you tomorrow, in 5 years, in 10 years, and in 20 years. And if you don't recognize the power you have over creating your future, I remember once being with an ex-boyfriend and it was late. I was dancing, salsa dancing, which is amazing, cardio, awesome. And we wanted to grab some quick, stupid food. This is before I was gluten-free. So I think I want to get like Taco Bell or something, right? So I'm standing in the drive-through at Taco Bell, and I see this very, very unhealthy looking obese woman walk out. I went, okay, we're getting out of here. I'm going to eat that apple that's sitting on the chair that doesn't seem that appetizing to me right now. But that was my, okay. Or the people who are walking with canes. That's why I was so adamant as a personal trainer to concentrate on joint on joint integrity, because too many people do stupid exercises that wreck their joints. Yeah, it could build some muscle and increase your metabolism, but then you're going to be injured and you can't do anything. So I was like so crazy about joint integrity and biomechanics for so long, because people don't realize that what you do now, like when you get sick, the damage has been done. Can you reverse it? Absolutely. But wouldn't it be so much better if you just start it now? Be preventative and think ahead and think, if I eat this thing, what's it going to do to my digestion? Am I going to start to wear away little tiny holes? Am I going to get leaky gut, which leads to inflammation and autoimmune disease? And then I'm going to be sick, and then I'm going to feel bad, and I'm going to, anyway. I could go on, but I want to bring into the conversation a question that Jeannie Peters, one of our, I guess she'd be the local registered dietitian extraordinaire of the show, because she's at the medical clinic that I work at, and a dear friend. And I told her I was interviewing you, and she said it was awesome that I was having you on. And if so, have him spell out the relationship between wheat and insulin sensitivity. We now know that insulin sensitivity test starts 10 years before you see the beginnings of heart disease. These two are connected, which you did kind of go over, right? Make sure you get him to share with your audience the key lab tests that people need to have done to evaluate their insulin sensitivity. Everyone needs to get a fasting insulin done, but he'll share a few other tests that you do.
Yeah, it's simple, because it's the amylopectin A. So amylopectin A is the carbohydrate. So legumes have amylopectin C, for instance. So there's a difference in structure, in the branch chain structure. The amylopectin A of wheat and the amylopectin of related grains like oats and millet and corn and rice, they all have this unique structure that makes it so, unlike the proteins, makes them highly digestible by the enzyme amylase in your saliva and in your stomach. And so if you just put some bread in your mouth and chew it, your blood sugar goes way up. It's how fast it is. And so the amylopectin A is responsible for very high blood sugars. So a typical blood sugar after, say, a bagel would be 150, 180, higher if you're insulin resistant. And repetitive high blood sugars are accompanied by high blood insulin, and repetitive high blood insulin leads to resistance to insulin. So if we were to take a fasting insulin, like you're talking about, in a slender insulin sensitive person, their insulin level is going to be 1 or 3 microunits per liter. If we take someone who's insulin resistant, visceral fat, hypertensive, overweight, their fasting insulin is going to be 30, 70, 90, 110 microunits. So it's not like 50% worse, it's many-fold worse. And of course, insulin causes fat accumulation and suppresses fat mobilization. And so those high insulins and people with insulin resistant make you fatter, make you gain weight, prevents weight loss. And so wheat and related grains contribute to that process. And it gets worse because of the gliadin-derived opioid peptides that drive appetite, and the other components that drive inflammation, because inflammation makes insulin resistance worse. So it's around and around and around. The more grains you eat, the worse the inflammation, the worse the insulin resistance. Of course, the great irony here is we're told, limit your fat, eat more healthy whole grains, right? And of course, we have a big food industry who's willing and able to feed and serve your family breakfast cereals, baked products. Of course, many people's diets are dominated by wheat and related grains. And so it's no wonder we have a population that is the fattest that ever walked this planet, has more type 2 diabetes, a man-made disease at epidemic levels, and all the other associated things. You know, it's scary, JJ, to think diabetes is not just diabetes. Diabetes is amputations, kidney failure, blindness, cutting 8 years off your life. It's a whole so it's not like you just have to deal with your blood sugar and you're going to have a nice, happy, long life. No. Bad stuff happens. Yet it's so easy to get rid of type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. To identify or measure insulin resistance, easiest way, no one does. There's a very elaborate test that they do in research that's for something called HOMA. No one does that in practice. So it boils down to fasting glucose, fasting insulin, and hemoglobin A1C. And there's many other measures that accompany insulin resistance. Those are the 3 main measures. And by the way, so one thing I do not do. You go to your doctor says, "Oh, JJ, your hemoglobin A1C is 5.6%, just below the cutoff for pre-diabetes. You're okay." You know that you're not okay. You have 300% increased risk for cardiovascular death and other, because what the doctor is saying, he's not saying, JJ, you're fine. He's saying you don't need insulin or drugs yet. you're there for okay. But that does not mean you're not absolved of all those health risks from that measure. So we aim for a hemoglobin A1C of 5.0% or less, fasting glucose 90 milligrams per deciliter or less, 70 to 90, and a fasting insulin of 4 microunits or less.
That was my exact next question, was to give those numbers, because I know people are going, well, what is it? What is it? And, working in an integrative medical clinic with, bioidentical hormones and looking at vitamin D levels, right? I mean, vitamin D levels, that's one of the biggest issues right now with doctors who are saying, oh, you're 30, you're within the range. I'm like, 30's in the toilet. What are you talking about? Oh, you're below, you're at 12. No, you're like dead. Like, this is not where it needs to be. But again, it's like, oh, and I'm not really I don't care to change like a person who doesn't want to change. This isn't the goal here. The goal is to reach those who know that there's other options and that the status quo needs to be challenged in terms of your own application to this. So you don't just listen to the doctor without questioning it yourself, just learning a little bit, because unlike other subjects where I'm never going to learn how to put my car together, I'm never going to do an oil change myself, right? Just not going to happen. This is my body, and I only get one of them in this lifetime. And while things can regenerate and I can fix things, I don't like, this is mine to protect and to make the best that it can. And I would hope that people care before you start taking drugs and saying yes to surgeries you don't need, to do a little homework because you love yourself enough to respect the body you were given and born into, to make sure that you're doing the best that you can for it, because it's the only one that you get in this lifetime. So I know you've been on the cutting edge of more stuff, and I want to talk about what you're doing now with the microbiome and what's coming up for you with your new book. But before I just want to ask a few more questions about wheat and gluten, because again, I can hear the people who are still like, I hear you and I'm scared now, but I'm not necessarily ready to make this big leap. And I'm not really believing you because there's still skinny people who eat gluten who seem fine.
Yeah, just like you've heard this. Oh, my uncle smoked cigarettes and died at age 88 of old age. Yeah, there are exceptions to the rule, but the exceptions don't disprove the rule. So I have yet to meet a person who did not experience some adverse effect of consuming wheat or grains. They may not have recognized it as that. They may not know that cataracts are largely a disease of grains and sugar. They may not know that diabetes, a disease of grains and sugars. They may not know that autoimmune diseases are initiated by the gliadin protein of wheat. They may not recognize that heart rhythm disorders are to a great degree. In other words, they'll say, I don't have celiac disease or I don't have gluten sensitivity. But wheat and grain consumption has adverse effects that show up as so many other problems. One of the things we haven't talked about, for instance, are the phytates in grains. So phytates in wheat germ agglutinin have been enriched by farmers in the wheat plant because they're great for pest resistance. It makes the wheat plant less susceptible to molds and insects. So farmers they selected strains that were richer in wheat germ agglutinin and phytates. Well, phytates are very good at binding all positively charged minerals in your gut: calcium, magnesium, manganese, iron, zinc. And so people, we're told you must eat grains for vitamins and fiber. Actually, the opposite is true. When you consume grains, you become deficient in numerous nutrients, but especially positively charged minerals. And so iron, I've seen ladies, hardly ever guys, don't know why, ladies who have resistant iron deficiency anemia. These are ladies who have hemoglobins of 7, normal's 12 and higher. And they say, I'm cold all the time. I'm breathless. I'm tired. My doctor checked. He gives me iron tablets. He gives me iron injections. He did a bone marrow biopsy, and they're giving me periodic blood transfusions. Stop the grains. They're normal within 2 weeks. It's the phytates. Zinc, this becomes relevant during a pandemic. If you're consuming grains, you're binding and pooping out all the zinc in your diet, you've impaired your immune response. Calcium, obvious. Magnesium, big problem. So in other words, consuming grains causes numerous health deficiencies. And each of those deficiencies has implications. Magnesium deficiency leads to osteoporosis and heart rhythm disorders and hypertension. So these are big, big, big issues. But the bottom line here is that the national advice to cut your fat, eat more healthy whole grains, and the proliferation of fast food and processed foods has done a big number on American health. Yet the doctor doesn't get that, as you know. The doctor's too focused via willful ignorance on CT on CT scans and MRIs and laparoscopy and other revenue generating procedures. So that's why what you're doing here, JJ, is so important.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just want to empower people. Again, it's not to be anti-doctor, because obviously you're a doctor, and I appreciate all the doctors that are pioneering, teaching people how to think. Please, everybody, put your brain on and do a little bit of constructive, deduction here about things like logic and reason. And know you have an immune system, but at this point, we're like, the world has acted as, the ones who hate the idea of hypnosis because they think someone's going to control their brain. It's already happening, everybody. Right. So I'm trying to wake people up one person at a time to, again, do what they think is not possible because they have 5 other doctors telling them something else.
Yep.
And so I want everyone to get Wheat Belly if you don't already have it. There's a new version out that was done in 2019. So please get Wheat Belly, read it, share it with the people who have type 2 diabetes, share it with, like, if they're interested, let them know there's hope. Obviously don't shove it down anyone's throat, but you can always invite people to listen to the show, share the show. Share the blog, the wheatbellyblog.com by Dr. Davis. And again, I'm sure there's plenty of information there that you can direct people to in order to, again, just know that there's another choice. That's all. I just want people to know their choices. What you do is what you do. That's your business. But it's the understanding that, no, the doctor said this, right? It's the person that has the 30 pills that they take every day and wonder why they're sensitive to all foods, because they have no gut, because they've completely have leaky gut from all the medication they have, and they don't feel good because they're on these medications, and they think, well, but my doctor said, but there are other doctors saying other things. And that's why I have a show, to have these conversations with the doctors who are saying other things, because we're all expanding and learning. And when we learn new information and we realize we were wrong before, we want to move forward, and maybe we'll learn more. But right now, for the last 20 years, the data is pretty clear, people. Wheat isn't good for you. I've cut it out. Being gluten-free is easy. And I always say that to people because there's no health benefit. I've said it from the beginning. Dairy was harder for me to give up. And I'm not 100% dairy-free, but I mostly am. But to me, when I looked at wheat, I thought, well, that's easy, because there's no benefit to it. There's nothing in it that I can't get somewhere else. It's not like something my body has to have. It's not essential to my life to eat this. And when I can replace it with something else, especially, so I went from a show that had Tasty Tuesdays to my paleo gluten and dairy free cooking show, replacing, grains with nuts, having the almond flours and the cashew flours and the coconut flours and things that have more fiber and more protein, and doing keto. We've talked about keto on the show. We've talked about intermittent fasting. We've talked about the fasting mimicking diet. So a lot of different topics to, again, give people tools to, whether or not you commit to this right away. Although I'd say if you really do, let's talk about that. What's the time frame, someone in your educated opinion? Mine is that people need about 2 weeks to 4 weeks to release inflammation. So if they do an elimination diet, that they should at least do 2 weeks, but really 4 to see, and to allow their body to sort of heal and release that inflammation. Is there a certain number of days that you would recommend?
It depends on what form the inflammation takes. If it's let's say psoriasis, it may take some weeks or longer. If it's neurological inflammation, like cerebral ataxia, that can take months to years to reverse. But then there are other forms that, like an elevated C-reactive protein or other inflammatory measure, that can reverse within days. By the way, C-reactive proteins in this neighborhood, people who follow these ideas, is typically 0. Yet we have this conventional conversation that if you have a high C-reactive protein, you're thereby at risk for cardiovascular disease. You must take high-dose Crestor. That's the Jupiter trial, by the way. And that is widely practiced, by the way, by my colleagues, which is the most absurd, ridiculous idea, one of the most stupidest ideas, that is, inflammation is treated by a statin drug. And by the way, the statin drugs is now clear disrupt the microbiome composition dramatically. Even if you're slender and active, it gives you the microbiome of an obese type 2 diabetic. And that's why people who take statin drugs develop diabetes. It's via the microbiome. So, which is better? Take a statin drug to address your cardiovascular risk, or address the actual cause of cardiovascular disease? That's the original idea that I practiced years ago. And you know what, JJ? It works. You can reduce coronary calcium scores. I've done it hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of times. It's easy to do, yet it's I published some of those data, but it doesn't get the attention because there's no payoff at the end. And that's the sad truth of modern medicine.
So can we agree on 2-week minimum for
Oh,
some
yes.
symptoms? That's okay. That's okay. I'm with you because I hear your passion. I appreciate that very much. Because
It
statins.
could be as fast as 5 to 7 days. So one of the things I have something called, oh, you listen, who people who just say, listen, don't bother with the science. Just tell me what to do. There are people like that. I wrote a book called Wheat Belly 10-Day Grain Detox. And I've got a private Facebook page where we support people through the thing. Anybody's interested in that, you can sign up in the Wheat Belly blog. But people will share their selfies and they'll say, it's only been 5 days, but look at me. Their eyes are bigger. Their cheeks have shrunk. They've lost weight, but it's not just weight. These people who lose, let's say, 6 pounds over the first 10 days will look like they lost 30 pounds. And it's not because of the weight so much as the reversal of inflammation. So inflammation recedes a big, powerful start within days, but a variable time depending on what kind of inflammation you have.
Okay. So
and whether you have SIBO, SIFO, and endotoxemia, that's the new lesson we learned in the last few years. That there are people who say, "I'm doing great. I lost 43 pounds. I don't have high blood pressure anymore. My psoriasis is gone. My migraine headaches are 90% better, and my rheumatoid arthritis is better, but I still have occasional flare-ups, and I still have to take the prednisone." Why would that be? That has become largely a microbiome conversation. And that was the missing piece, addressing the microbiome. And that is, and now we're seeing those people say, once and for all, I'm done. I'm off everything.
And that's what's coming next, right? You have a book coming out on the microbiome.
In 2022, yeah. Hopefully all the pandemic concerns will be all gone. We can talk about other things. But it's leading to a ton of new, like the AIR device that detect hydrogen gas. And by the time that book comes out, we'll also have, I hope Angus Short comes out with this device. This is called the AIR device, AIRE, and the company's called Food Marble. And that device should, I hope, if it comes true, measure hydrogen gas, methane, and hydrogen sulfide. So your listeners might want to know about the thing I told you about before we came on the air. And that is one of the lessons learned. If you buy yogurt at the grocery store, the commercial process to make yogurt is a 4-hour fermentation process. Well, most microbes, there's something called doubling time in bacteria. It's the time required for one bacteria to become two bacteria, two to become four. Bacteria don't have males and females or mommies and daddies. They just double. So in 4 hours, if the doubling time is 3 hours, it's a typical bacterial doubling time. One bacteria becomes two. That's it. So what I did was I took extended fermentation, 12 doubling times. Do you remember the old kids' riddle? Which would you rather have? $1 million or a penny that I double every day for 30 days? Kids are, I'll take the $1 million, right? Not recognizing that the penny that doubles every day leads to over $5.5 million after 30 days. Same thing with bacteria. It takes about 30 hours for bacteria to really uptick in numbers. So we fermented for 36 hours. I also added prebiotic fiber to nourish microbes, like adding fertilizer to a garden. And the last time we did flow cytometry on our yogurt, we got 262 billion counts per half cup serving. So we take selected microbes. In this case, I started out with Lactobacillus reuteri. Reuteri, Reuteri, after Gerhard Reuter, the German scientist. And Reuter is a microbe that most modern people have lost. We make this yogurt out of it, and it boosts oxytocin release from the pituitary. Not my speculation, this is fact. And when you boost oxytocin by restoring this microbe lost from 96% of modern people, you have a surge in empathy for other people, a desire for connection. People say things like, I like my husband better. I like my children better. I like I introduce myself to strangers in line at Starbucks. Now, JJ, of course, this is all happening, putting aside the pandemic. It's happening during a period of record social isolation, suicide, record divorce rates. Is part of the explanation of the loss of this? I think it is. And I'm seeing my audience say, oh, I can't wait to see my family. People are changing based on this crazy. And a lot of ladies will like to know that when you boost oxytocin, there's an increase in dermal collagen. So, as we age, we lose collagen. That's why people get crepey skin when they get older. Well, there's a huge increase in dermal collagen. Your skin gets smoother, and many ladies start to lose wrinkles within about 4 to 8 weeks. There's also an acceleration of healing. There's a restoration of youthful muscle and strength. So I haven't gone to the gym much during the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, when I started consuming the yogurt, I gained, people don't believe me when I tell them this, I'm going to be 64 years old. I gained 13 pounds of muscle in 3 weeks, and my strength went through the roof. I go to the gym once a week, 15 minutes, I can't stand it, but my strength went through the roof. I went from that pulling down, for instance, 130 pounds to 200 pounds from multiple repetitions. So strength goes through the roof, restoration of youthful muscle and strength, preservation of bone density. You lose half as much bone from this yolk, from this microbe. There's an increase in libido. There's deeper, I'm a chronic insomnia, terrible insomnia. I sleep like a baby, JJ, 9 hours straight through, deep childlike dreams, flying, showing up in English class in your underwear, all that crazy stuff that kids, all that comes back. Now think about this. Guys get a rise in testosterone, smoother skin, accelerated healing like a child, restoration of muscle, bone density. I think this is as close as I've ever seen to something that turns the clock back 10 or 20 years. That's one microbe, JJ. That's one microbe. And now we're cultivating all kinds of microbes, getting all kinds of really cool effects. But that's the new world we're in, of restoring lost microbes also. And I think, JJ, I think that the benefits are better if you are wheat and grain free and have addressed the common nutrients that we address, vitamin D, magnesium, omega-3 fatty acids, iodine, that all address insulin resistance. And then you take these more advanced microbiome strategies, and you get these really cool, and I think, age-reversing effects.
So I'm sorry, when are you sending me some of these? How can I get it?
So anybody wants to make this, I have a blog post in my wheat book. So it'll be in the new book too. And the new book will be, I don't have a title for the new book. We're having fights with the publisher about the title, but that'll come out. That will have a whole bunch of recipes like this for really kind of life-changing recipes. But in the meantime, there's a recipe in my Wheat Belly blog. It's called something like Make El Reuteri, 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 Make El Reuteri Yogurt, a step-by-step guide. And I show you. And people who make yogurt say, that's not how you make yogurt. Well, I know that because we don't give a damn about yogurt. It's really a bacterial count amplification system. And that's why you buy a probiotic and pay a lot of money for it. It may have 10 billion, 25 billion. So we're getting 260 billion out of a half cup serving. And by the way, the yogurt's quite delicious too. Have it with some blueberries, squirt of stevia, something like that, some nuts or chia seeds, whatever. And it's delicious and fun. People love doing this. And it's a chance to not only enjoy yogurt, but also enjoy these spectacular health benefits.
Well, I'm going to try it. Now, you're telling people how to make it. It's funny. I got one of those 9-in-1 Ninja air fryer, pressure cooker, blah, and it has like a yogurt setting. Now, I'm guessing I probably shouldn't make it in that because that would be something standard maybe in the way that you would tell people to do it. If you're listening to this, I've already researched it. The link is in the show notes, by the way. Or if you're on the video, the link is underneath this for that particular blog because I will find it before I publish the show. But, in terms of the cooking of it, is it like what I could have used something like that yogurt setting on my Ninja? One
of the odd things about these microbes is different microbes enjoy different temperatures. So Reuteri likes human body temperature. So for round numbers, I choose 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So you need a device that is around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It dies at around 109 degrees, even though most yogurt is made at 108 to 114 degrees. So it's a little unique in that. It's very heat intolerant. So what you do is plug your device in, let it run for an hour or two with a thermometer in it, see what the temperature is. Or you can buy a device that allow you to set the temperature and the time. When I first did this, JJ, I bought a sous vide. I went to Bed Bath & Beyond, had a coupon, got it for $79. It's a water bath for slow cooking meat, but you can use it to make yogurt. And you can set the temperature and the time. Great. I started talking about this. It caused a run on sous vide devices, and they jacked the price up to $449. So that's not a good choice now. But there are some other sous vides now that have come down in price. There's also some yogurt makers, but you want one that has adjustable temperature and time. Because what if you want to make Bacillus coagulans yogurt because it reduces arthritis pain? And so that yogurt likes 115 degrees to 122 degrees. So ideally, if the listeners are interested in doing these kind of crazy projects, you get a device that allows you to set the temperature. If you do let's say you're sick and tired of paying $60 for a probiotic, well, make yogurt from your probiotic, provided it has no fungi in it. And that mixture of microbes typically does best at around 106 degrees. So ideally, before you spend any money, your listeners should get a device that allows. So Lavelle, for instance, and MV, M as in Mary and V as in Victor. MV Power is a very inexpensive yogurt maker. It's like $30 and it allows you to set temperature and time, and you get these great results.
Well,
and save a lot of money.
Well, I'm pretty sure my Ninja can set the temperature. I haven't tried the yogurt setting, but because it's different air crisper, bake and roast and broil. And anyway, but you can definitely set the temperature on it. So I'm going to try it now. I was thinking like, oh, I'm not going to use that, but now I am. And we should do a little thing in the Inner Circle membership with it. Everybody tries it and we see what, compare notes and do it for how many days. Like, well, okay, so we're going to do this. About how many days, how much would it be, like a half a cup a day for X amount of days until we see something? Or I've often heard that with probiotics, you shouldn't have them every day. Like you should only have them every couple of days because they should be doing their job when they get into your gut. You don't have to necessarily bombard yourself with them. So what's the take on that?
So it depends on what effect you're looking for. If you're looking for smoother skin, that's what the ladies like. Earliest it starts is 4 weeks. Your hair will grow faster and your fingernails and toenails will grow faster. That starts, it's kind of hard to gauge how fast your hair is growing. You'll probably notice it at about 4 weeks also. The deeper sleep is within days. The increase in empathy is virtually immediate. So all different effects depending on what specific effect you're looking for. But it is, now here's an odd thing, and this we're just beginning to explore. We ran a bunch of salivary oxytocin levels on people. I came up, by the way, 0. This is off the yogurt. I had to stop. It was miserable, JJ. I stopped the yogurt. I'm not sleeping anymore. 3 o'clock in the morning, watching TV, reading. It's just horrible, right? So I had to go back to being an insomniac, and me and a bunch of other people did the same thing, and then started taking the Reuteri again, but checked salivary oxytocin levels baseline. And one of the great, we're going to do this formally. This was just an anecdotal experience. I come up virtually 0 at the start. Other people come up 30 or 40 or 100 picograms. In other words, the people who have really high oxytocin levels don't experience all the same effects. They do get benefits, but not the same magnitude of benefit like I get, or other people who have 0 or very low starting levels. Other people have levels of 5 or 8, very low levels, and they experience big effects. Now, unfortunately, salivary oxytocin is a research tool, and we can't tell your listeners, go get this test. It will happen in future where you can get a baseline oxytocin level to see if you're going to have this kind of response or not. But right now, we just got to operate in the dark and just got to take it on faith that consuming this yogurt raises oxytocin.
Well, and results, right? I always tell people when they're asking about doing some kind of elimination diet, we talk about what to get rid of. And I say, you can go get the tests, but why not just eliminate it and then see what happens? And the results of how your body shifts is going to tell you, oh, I go to the bathroom more often. I've lost a couple pounds of water weight. I'm not as bloated. I don't have any gas. If you're paying attention, you'll notice what happens to your body, and you don't need a test to tell you that before you decide to do it. Just do it because it's an elimination diet. It's a test. And so I would say, well, yeah, it's maybe not scientifically proven exactly what happens. If you feel better, whether even be placebo or not, isn't that enough of a reason to do something because you want to feel better? So, but again, I love the conversation about the microbiome because there are so many bacteria that we don't, from nose to anus, right? Everywhere along the track, there's different bacteria, and everyone keeps thinking the same ones are going to get all the things, and they're not. So I love this conversation, and I want to have it again when your book is finished and when you have a title. Come on back. Let's talk about it because we all know this is one of the missing pieces of health now as we keep evolving. We didn't even talk about, but I don't want to because people can read the book, why wheat has become an issue, right? It's because how it's been genetically modified over time. and how it doesn't represent the same wheat that was had years and years and years ago, a grandparent's time. So it's not just that, oh, wheat's always been bad and all of a sudden we're feeling the effects of it. No, it's changed. Just like how many years ago no one was dying of peanut allergies, and now how many people die eating a peanut? It's not because it's because the peanut's been changed. It's not because we're eating the same things, all of a sudden our bodies are reacting differently. There's too many chemicals in all of our foods and too many cross-contain. Why corn is bad now, because it's bioengineered with a pesticide. And so now it's actually a poison. So when you eat it, you're eating a pesticide, which is why you have a bad reaction to it. So anyway, we could go on and on and on. Please come back. And in between, from now until then, I want everyone to go to wheatvalleyblog.com. Check the link out below about the step-by-step guide to making your own yogurt. And if you do this and I don't know you and you've listened to this show, I'd love to hear any results that you have. So please make sure to email me. And then any other last, advice for people, Dr. Davis?
It's great for us to have feedback, and people love to see these before after pictures, your selfies. So I invite people to share their photos, their selfies, or their experiences. There's a Wheat Belly Facebook page. There's an Undoctored Facebook. Undoctored, another book I wrote, shows you how to get rid of your doctor. But it's some, and you'll see the people who've posted before and after photos, and they're astounding.
Awesome. Everyone, check it out. Thank you, Dr. Davis, so much for coming on. Long overdue. I look forward to having you back. Thank you. Thank you.